Welcome to another episode of The Shift with Elena Agad. In this episode, I chat with Scott Dettman. He's the CEO and board of directors at Avenica. Avenica is an amazing platform. I'm a huge fan already. Basically, what they do is they say, listen, when you're looking to hire somebody, don't just focus on their resume. And being in recruitment and talent development, I can tell you that resumes are not the best way to identify if the person is going to be successful in that particular role. So it does not look at potential. It does not predict their abilities in the future. It just tells you what you have done in that experience. But in a world of work where you might need to be wearing different hats, or you might want to change your career, or whatever you've done before is no longer relevant, how do you actually pivot? And how can how can other people recognize your potential beyond your resume? So that is basically what the platform does, is their team is trained to look beyond the resume, instead have different assessments, different interactions with the candidate to really get to know them and so on, and see their potential beyond what's on a resume. And I think it's really spot on, because also a lot of people don't know how to sell themselves. They don't know how to present it. They're not even sure how to put all those pieces together to say, this is what I have the potential to do. So, and I very much speak, this is very relevant to my experience and also Scott's experience that he shares in this episode, because I was always the jack of all trades. People, it's very hard to put me in a box, and people struggle to do that. I've always said most of my jobs I've gone through conversations of somebody knowing me and knowing what I can do versus paper, because I don't sound great on paper. I sound very confusing to a lot of people. And so Scott shares his own, again, experience around his career and how he came about to being the CEO of Avenica, and really just kind of we talked about AI and future of work and future of jobs and so on. What does that look like? And in a world of work where we need people to be able to wear multiple hats, do we just evaluate somebody based on their previous experience, or how do you actually evaluate for that potential, right? So anyway, really interesting episode. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Scott, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to chat with you about the work that you're doing and just, kind of the impact that you're making out there in the world. But tell me a little bit more about your career story, how you got to where you are today. My audience will be super interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my story starts, I guess, in Milwaukee, where I'm from. So poor kid, grew up in a bad neighborhood, had a variety of challenges, and happy to talk more about that. But ultimately went off to college, played football in college, and then when I graduated, it was 2009, which was not the best time to be on the job market. I had basically zero network, zero resources, and zero idea what I was going to go do. Um, I had a degree in political science, which didn't have a ton of like clear path into anything. So I started applying for jobs like crazy. I think I applied to something like 400 jobs, got one interview, was brought in for an interview basically by accident. So it's sort of an interesting story, but they brought me in because the CEO of this consulting company wanted to help me by telling me I had no business applying for the job I was applying for with my background. I took that opportunity to say, like, well, let me tell you why you're wrong, and kind of made my pitch. And I walked out of that meeting with a better job offer than the job I applied for. So, which was great. But part of it was just like I was bold enough to say what was on my mind and just to tell him what I thought. And I also was willing to kind of message my own value to him and kind of tell him my story. And so fortunately he bought it and didn't have me escorted from the building, which he probably could have done. But so I did that for a little while. I had an opportunity to kind of like help grow a division of a business that was in healthcare and technology consulting. From there, I really started to get immersed within the world of data and just started to feel like there's so much more I didn't know and I wanted to know more. So I decided to go back to school and pursued a PhD in data science, and was doing that and kind of like building, kind of working on some startups here. They're doing some consulting, and then I got contacted by Manpower Group, large human capital industry player. And they basically said, hey, we don't really know what data science is, but we think we need to hire somebody who does that. Are you interested in it? So
I like the honesty they had.
yeah. I mean, it maybe wasn't that honest,
Yeah,
but
I
like that's
got
what
you.
they
I
were
got you.
saying,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
so,
yeah.
through the lines. So I went to Manpower Group and just started to kind of uh, walk the halls and figure out what I could break, and see what I could learn. And I fell in love with the idea of connecting people to meaningful work and helping to give people a path to economic advancement. And I also then got exposed to like how awful the job process is, and how bad we are at actually assessing talent and ascribing fit and things like that. So I'm happy to get more into detail on that because that sort of
Mm,
is the underpinning behind what we do at Avenica. But through my time at Manpower Group, I was fortunate enough to have some great mentors, and uh, got moved into different areas, got exposed to different parts of the business, and then ultimately um, uh, I was assigned to move to Minnesota and take over a region, run part of the business, and kind of experience the business firsthand, which was tremendously beneficial. And I went out to that experience like completely naive, thinking I understood everything about this business. I'd been working there for a few years and like intellectually understood it. And I got to the field and realized like, wow, I don't know anything. And so I just got beat up for the first like 6 months. But then I started to listen to the people around me and learn and grow, and just always I have this like approach of like I always try to approach things like a beginner. Like even if I've done something for 10 years, I try to approach it as a beginner. And if I can keep that mindset, it allows me to continually learn and grow. And so did that, ended up having a lot of success in that, growing that region pretty quickly, and caught the eye of a private equity venture group that had acquired a company in 2017 that had kind of fallen on some hard times. And so this is like end of 2019. They basically said they were looking for someone to come in and kind of refound the company. So kind of look at what was good and what wasn't, and build on what is good, and get rid of what wasn't. And so I started doing that, just before COVID, which you know, COVID threw a wrench in things, but also I like to try to frame things in a positive light. Like COVID was a terrible thing, tragic, but at the same time, from a business perspective, it gave us kind of the air cover to really start to try some things and pull some things apart and see what was working, because business slowed down so much that like we had
mm-hmm.
time, we had bandwidth, and we could try some stuff and fail. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. We also had a business at that time, and I remember I was like, this is, there was some silver linings there for sure, because it allowed, it accelerated business in some cases as
yeah.
well. I love this approach that, you like approach it as a beginner. I love that. I was actually reading what was it called? It's right here somewhere. Forgot the name of the book. It's called Innovate and Wonder, I think, but it's like a collection of Jeff Bezos' letters to the stakeholders and so on. So it's called, I think it's
Oh
called
yeah, yeah.
Wonder and Innovate, and at the end of each, like, and it's all about his thought process and etc. And however one feels about Amazon, what I took away from that book, which you just remind me of, is he always would say it's still day one. So
Yeah.
always, it's still day one, and I love that. And I've been like really trying to apply that mindset to the work that I do as well. And it's pretty interesting how it changes some of the decision making when you look at it that way, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
I think it really forces you to look at things with clear eyes and objectivity, and to think that like you don't get too comfortable with any successes, because you're not like patting your back, patting yourself on the back and looking back, but you're also you're not beating yourself up about failures, because you're thinking, hey,
mm-hmm.
it's still the first day. Like we're just getting started. It's all good. Like what's let's go build tomorrow, and that's it's fun. I mean, I don't know. I think I heard somebody say once. I think maybe it was a comedian that their definition of happiness is having something to look forward to. And I think the idea of like staying a beginner or thinking from like a day one mindset, I think it just helps you kind of get excited and jazzed about the work you're going to do every day. And let's
Yeah,
be honest, I mean, running a business, starting a business, building a business, adding value in a role, whatever it is that you're doing, it takes a ton of energy, a
yeah.
ton. And so if you can direct all that energy in the right place, and kind of continually show up that way, amazing things can happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we dive into Avenica, I'm curious. It's pronounced Avenica, right? Am I saying
Correct.
it
Yep.
correctly? Okay.
Yeah.
Why political science? I'm just always curious about why people study what they study, just because that was my minor, and it gave me nothing.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
It's a good question. My initial plan was to go to law school.
Hmm.
I think I'd been told most of my life that that I was argumentative, and that I had a tendency want like to debate, and so people kind of said like, yeah, maybe you should be a lawyer. I also like to write, and I read a lot, and so people just thought like, hey, you should be a lawyer. I then went and worked at a law firm, and the lawyers there told me like, hey, you are one of those weird people that would absolutely love law school. You would love law school. Everyone else would hate you, but you would love law school. But you would hate being a lawyer.
Mm,
And so like I asked them why, basically because their view is that I would just get so frustrated with the ways that like laws are written, and I'd want to just change everything. I'd want to fix things that were broken. And the best lawyers aren't, they're not really interested in fixing what's broken. They're interested in leveraging the rules as they exist. And like, I don't, and so I think it was some of the best advice I had ever received. And so I studied political science because I felt like that was a path that I could take to go into a legal profession. And by the time I realized that I wasn't going to go be a lawyer, I was already kind of path dependent, and was like, okay, I'm going to go, finish this degree so I have the piece of paper. But yeah, there wasn't a ton of thought, to be honest. It was just sort of like, yeah, this is fun and interesting, and I think I could do okay, so let's go that way.
mm. Was there any pivotal moment in your life where you felt like it's the right time for Avenica? Like, was there anything, like why that choice was made, that decision was made? Because it could have been, could have gone any other way, but why did you pursue it like that?
You mean like when did I decide to make the
Yeah.
leap and go?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things. I was I was 31 years old when I was contacted about the Avenica opportunity. Um, and I had been running this region, and I had done these different roles, like cool opportunities in Manpower Group. I was kind of the golden boy there. And like I had a very bright future there, but that future was going to be, uh, it was going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
And, for better or for worse, I'm a little bit impatient. And so the idea of like continuing to do what I was doing when I felt like, okay, I figured this out now, like what's next? Like I was ready to go do what was next because I had built this business and it was thriving, and I had a team in place that was getting ready to take over. And the message I received was like, hey, we're so proud of you. You're doing great. Keep it up. And, let's look in the next 2 years about having you move into something else. And it was just kind of like, I don't think I can wait 2 years to go be challenged again, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
I had sort of figured it out, and so I was actively in conversations with my mentor at Manpower Group about like, is this the right time for me to pick up my family and move to Europe and run a country there or something, or
Mm-hmm.
do I go into a completely different functional area within the business and take that on? Like how do I go do something that makes me feel really uncomfortable again? And there just wasn't the right time, wasn't the right opportunity, and it was just I was kind of in this holding pattern, and so you know because of the holding pattern, this I took the call, I had the conversation. I didn't think it was like a job offer at the time. I just was having a conversation, and it was how many chances do you get at something like that? And I just felt like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to look back and regret not making this move. I could always come back to Manpower Group. I think
Yeah.
they'd always take me back. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think they'd take me back. um, so I felt like this is something I was excited about. And look, we started with this whole notion of helping people launch their careers and kind of bridging the gap between what happens when you leave school and you start your career. And like that was personal to me too, because I'd
Mm-hmm.
always been told like, hey, education's the silver bullet. Go get a degree, and then everything else gets taken care of from there. But it's just not true. And so many people go and they graduate from college and they do everything the world tells them to do, and they pull themselves together, do all the things, but then ultimately like they're on the job market and they don't know how to message themselves. They don't have a network. They're applying into like the black hole of LinkedIn or Indeed or something, never hearing anything back. And it's devastating. It should be like one of the most exciting times of your life, and it just beats you down. And so I've always had this pull to feel like there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a
Mm-hmm.
better way to do this. And um, yeah, so that was sort of the moment. And I think I remember getting off of the call. It was like Mother's Day, I think, and it was like a Sunday evening, and I had a conversation, and then I walked downstairs, and my wife saw me, and she's like, "Okay, just tell me if we're moving or not." That's what she said to me, and I was like, "Wait, is it that I don't have a poker face?" So it's like she knew that I was already kind of hooked, and I wanted to do this. So
Very cool, very cool. So, talk to me a little bit about Avenica, and how you're, I guess, revolutionizing recruitment and being in talent acquisition space that I am. I know how much work we need, and I'm all ears. I want to know what can be done differently. What are you guys doing differently?
Yeah, so for as long as I can remember, I've been really passionate and kind of obsessed with the idea of potential. This idea that like everybody's got these sort of superpowers that are just lying underneath the surface, and that if they're activated, they can be game changers. They can really accomplish great things. And in my time at Manpower Group, we participated in this like program with Google and Cognizant, and we basically tried to model out things that were available at time of an application, basically like a resume. We tried to pull what we could from a resume to predict job performance. And after a lot of money and a lot of time, we found that there was zero predictive value in resumes in terms of being able to predict job performance. We then pulled back and said, okay, well, maybe we can predict who's going to get hired and who's not. Again, zero predictive value. The only thing we were able to find a slight glimmer of like correlation on was the a recruiter's preference as to which candidates they were most likely to select to interview, which was basically just measuring bias, right? Which is kind of not helpful. So that whole experience, well, it was viewed as kind of this failure within Manpower Group. I viewed this as like this is light bulb kind of went on. Like this validates a lot of things that I've felt for a long time, which is we focus so much on like what's on this piece of paper, but it is a really inaccurate portrayal of what somebody might do or what somebody could accomplish. And so that mixed with my knowledge of data science, I just started to kind of think several years ago about like this idea that like, hey, we there's so much data available on people,
Mm-hmm.
and if we can have people go through some situational experiences, um, we can really extract the data that is going to lead to the highest level of predictability in terms of them being able to do a certain job really well. And nobody had just to this point, nobody's really gone and done the work to do that. So what we've done is we've effectively built, I think of it as like a supply side career launching platform. So we attract around 500 applicants every day into our platform. They come in, they apply, and after they apply, we are not filtering them out or selecting who gets a response. We're not doing anything like that. It's all user driven. So the candidate then goes and is experienced to our persona assessment. We call it Halo. And it gives us a bunch of data around like what their preferences are, their quirks, their ambitions. We then have them do a levels experience, which means they go and do some sort of like micro experience. Like it could be, we're going to send you a link and we're going to have you go watch a video. It's a 7-minute video about how to message yourself in a job interview. And you can only watch it once. And at the end of the video, we want you to, write the 3 most salient points from that interview and email this person at this email address. We're not going to give you this again. Like, just kind of almost purposely making it a little bit convoluted, but doing that on purpose to assess responsiveness, to assess follow through, to assess like detail orientation, to assess like how good are they at capturing information and then distilling that information into the written form. And we take people through these kinds of experiences, and then ultimately it culminates in the individual then scheduling time to meet with somebody on our team. So before we have spent any time, any money on like sourcing, which is where a lot of the energy
Mm-hmm.
gets spent in recruitment, we have basically created a funnel and filled our team's calendars with people that we have a mountain of data on already. So they've shared a bunch of information with us. They've, in some cases, they've done like a selfie video where they're kind of explaining, their life story or what they're interested in or what they want to do. So we're
Mm-hmm.
able to capture all of this data. We're just now scratching the surface on like how to be able to leverage it all. But the next phase then is these individuals meet with our team, and our team, they're not doing a traditional kind of interview. We've had them trained by people with a background in like behavioral therapy, and so what we're trying to do here is really trying to understand kind of the distance traveled for people. And what I mean by that is, somebody may come to us with a degree from a state school in psychology, and they've had a couple of jobs here or there, and on paper they look like a dime a dozen, right? They look like everybody else. But what we don't know, and what is never shared in an application, is that this person has seen food insecurity up close, right? They've dealt with food insecurity. They've experienced someone in, that they're close to struggling with addiction, or they've got a friend or family member who's incarcerated, or they've been, they've been abused or harassed, or they dealt with something really, really difficult in their life that was it was terrible, but it was also kind of pivotal to making them who they are. Because what we know is that in psychology tells us this, that like the people that have gone through things and can persevere and have the grit to kind of keep going and keep pushing, like those are the people that you want to bet on, because they're only going to continue to get better. They're going to continue to overcome. They're going to beat the odds. And but in our society we focus so much on where people start versus like how far they had to go to get to that starting point, right? And so like what we're trying to do is really tap into that story behind the lines of a resume, and then we can help people kind of own that story and say like, hey, this is really pivotal. We can help you message this in a way that is going to make you much more appealing on the job market. And that's something we do regardless of whether they're going to land with one of our hiring partners. But then on top of that, because we have all of this data, we know all these things about this person, we feel really confident in what they can do. Now, the next phase is we meet with our hiring partners and we take a similar kind of like data-driven assessment of what it takes to be successful in an individual role, right? So we kind of ignore things like job descriptions, because job descriptions are usually not that well written. They have a lot of like fluff language. They say things like, we're looking for a self-starter or somebody who's a good team player. Like, well,
Means
I don't know what the
nothing.
heck that means. Exactly. Yeah, it's just like, oh, it made the paragraph a little bit longer. That looks nicer.
Yeah.
So we're in this phase of like really trying to understand, if you're going to place somebody into a customer success role, what we want to know is who are your top 3 customer success people today, and we then go assess them and we say, what do we know about sort of the DNA of those individuals? What's interesting is those 3 individuals that are often top performers, they would almost never be hired based on the standards that are being used today, but like nobody's paying attention to that. So we're modeling the sort of persona, the personality, the background, the grit, the story of those individuals, and then connecting that back to what we already have in our pipeline. And because we're building these talent pools all over the country, we have an abundance of people kind of ready to go, and so we can connect the dots. And we do that because of our process, because the front end is so automated and we don't have to spend any time or money sourcing. We charge less than most other organizations would charge because we don't have the expenses. And we guarantee that these people are going to work out because the data tells us that they're going to. And
Mm-hmm.
in increasing cases, we have hiring partners that are, now fully trusting us and not interviewing our candidates at all. They're just hiring the people we tell them to hire, because it turns out that we actually, when we remove that portion, we can actually guarantee these people even longer, because it's a much better fit. Instead of implementing this kind of performance, kind of theatrical performance of an interview, and assuming that like these mid-level managers are any good at interviewing, they all think they are, but most of them are not. By bypassing some of that and doing that vetting on our side, we can actually guarantee a much better fit. And so we've had a tremendous amount of success doing that, over the last several years.
Hmm. I have so many comments and questions. I absolutely, there's so much
Go
gold in
for it.
what you're talking about. So first of all, I love the kind of the pre-screening process, because one, most people don't know how to write a good resume. We're usually really bad at selling ourselves in general and identifying all of that. I love it.
Totally.
And by the time they get to you, they've put the effort. So that person actually wants to be there, type thing. So that also
Right.
eliminates a lot of people. Let me just start with a couple of questions. Number one, so on your team, people that are reviewing these, are these like, what's their background? The reason I'm asking is because my pet peeve has always been people that are holding positions in corporates, for even like internal recruiters, often don't really have the psychology background, don't have the behavioral background, don't understand how to recognize potential. They're just like ticking the box, right? Which is why turnover and recruitment is usually very high, or like
Yep.
agency recruitment, right? So on your team, considering that they're analyzing all this data, what is their background, or how do you train them, I guess, to analyze all that data, which is a whole other skill on its own?
Yeah. So what we really aim to do is, the people on that team, they don't have any sort of like specialized degree in psychology or any sort of thing like that. But we really take our time when we're training people on how to do this. And so We basically explain to them how all the data works, and then how it fits, and we aim to kind of make it as easy as and simple to understand as possible. But I think more than that, what's most important that we do is we tell them that their customer, their focus is the candidate, not the hiring partner. So these are
Mm,
not people that are working from a rec, from a job requirement and going backwards. These are people that their job is to, I tell them this all the time. Their job is to stamp the heart of every candidate that they work with. So their job is to basically go and advocate for these individuals and to sort of help them tell their story and then pass them on to the next stage. So the next stage is really all about like kind of understanding client demand and then mapping that demand to the talent pool. But the people interacting directly with the candidates are all, their whole focus is kind of agnostic of any sort of hiring partner demand. So they don't care. And
mm-hmm.
part of the rationale for that, it's easy to say, it's hard to do, because you have to kind of break that cycle of like, we get, because this whole industry is built off of like, a demand side mentality, which is like, you have a job, I'm going to go try and fill your job. We don't think of it as filling jobs. We think of it as launching careers. And just even that small change in perspective allows these individuals to like get to know these people and to then be thinking of them and be sort of like advocating for them. So the background of the people that are doing these roles are people that have a high degree of empathy. We have a lot of people that have like a social work degree. They're
Mm-hmm.
people that want the best for people and want to help tell those stories. And frankly, a lot of the people that we hired to do this are people that came to us initially with the same exact challenge. And they were like, I have a background in doing this. I don't know what to do. I want to launch my career. And so, when it feels like the right fit, we sometimes have hired some of those people, and then they become advocates for people that have gone through the same thing they have. Right. So we're kind of leveraging some of that shared experience, and it's again, it's people that are passionate and outspoken and willing to go to the bat, go to bat for people,
Mm.
and that's what we're looking to create.
Yeah, yeah, and that alone, just the empathy piece and just the, and I totally agree. Like people who've done social kind of work, like just knowing people, knowing humans, knowing how to have a conversation, understanding body language, just so
Totally,
many different things that are not everybody possesses that. That's just a reality, right? So,
totally.
yeah, that's interesting. Curious. So. And I do see how all that data can add up to just a very fruitful candidate in terms of the quality, and like you won't even need to go beyond that your guys' screening. But how do you manage around certain, like I'll give you an example. I'm in the tech field and there's certain levels of technical expertise which vary from company to company, right? So for example, if we have somebody who, let's say, a software developer specializing in and tool X. Tool X specialization, the experience will vary. So a mid-level software developer specializing in this tool is different from a mid-level developer at a different company. So and our team would have to actually screen them and to say, according to us, this is the level that this person is actually at, no matter what they were at that previous company in the same kind of role. So how do you navigate around the very specific technical skills that a company might need?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We primarily are working with candidates that don't have a high level of technical, background or aptitude. So we're not placing a ton of like developers or engineers. We're placing engineers, but not in terms of like software engineers.
Mm-hmm.
So in the cases where we have done that, because we have done it, but in the cases where we've done that, we've leveraged like a tech check process. So basically, we get people through a certain level. They meet with our team, and then we realize, hey, like we focused entirely on the person, on sort of the right fit, on the DNA. Now let's confirm the skills. So in the skills confirmation process, like any role that requires a little bit more of a skill to be present, we do sort of a layer of skill assessment that can be, we usually work with our hiring partners on this and say like, okay, somebody that knows how to do these things, like what would they be able to do if we were to create a simulation where they had to go and do this like live, or like do this and then report back to us. So it's a little bit bespoke because those aren't that common for us, but there is some level of technical check. The other thing that we are doing, and again, we're just starting to do some of this, so it's something I'm excited to do more of. But we've developed something called AV Plus, which is our sort of skills arm of what we're doing. And the whole goal of that is to add what we think of as like plus one skills. So if you have somebody that goes through the process and they're like an economics major, and they've got an analytical mind, and they get all sort of the principles and all those kinds of things, but they've never used something like Tableau, we can then go and provide them like a quick hit training in Tableau that they can go through and complete. And then we can go and message like, hey, this person is now, functionally able to use Tableau, and everything we know about them to this date. Like, this is someone that, if given the opportunity, they're going to not just learn Tableau, they're going to master it, and they're going to continue to run with it and build upon it and grow. But again, most of what we're doing is launching entry level,
Yeah.
career entry level
Right.
positions. So the skills requirement, sometimes we see skills requirement and we really start to kind of dig deeper into that, because it's like, okay, does this person, when you talk about somebody having like Salesforce experience, like, do they really need to have Salesforce experience? Because that's an enterprise software that looks different no matter what company you go to, right? So like, what are you really trying to assess for? And what they're trying to assess for is this someone that can follow steps in a process,
Hmm.
right? And like,
Good point. Yeah.
so yeah, so we try to dig into those things, but yeah, we're not doing. I would say that the vast majority of the careers that we're launching are for people that are in kind of like low code or no code kinds of positions. And that was by design, right? Because there's so much noise out there in terms of like boot camps and tech recruiting, and like, that is a skills based profession. I totally get that, but the majority of the roles that we that sort of proliferate the entry level in our economy are really kind of like character skills based, or like
Hmm.
foundational skills, or like, I hate this term, but the idea of like soft skills, where that's really what needs to be present in somebody who present in someone who's going to do customer success or customer service or claims, or even something like help desk isn't a high skill kind of requirement.
Hmm.
It's more about communication. And so
Hmm.
that's really where we're focused versus like the skill proficiency.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Um, I think might also be interesting as you're speaking, although this for like early career starters, but I can also see the benefit of it for somebody like myself, for example, because one of the challenges I've always had, and I think a lot of people fall into that category, is like being a jack of all trades. And it's like, like I've all like, you don't know how many times when I've interviewed in my life, people say they either can't seem to fit me into a box, and it takes a lot of effort for somebody to
Yeah,
really, and I've always been hired through the hiring manager or the owners and so on. Like, so the people that know me, I rarely ever pass a resume screen. I don't think I've ever passed a
yeah,
resume screen. Like,
yeah,
because people don't know what to do with me. But
yeah.
I know how to
Same
tell
here.
my story, but it's very interesting, and I think so it'll be really useful for individuals that are like jack of all trades, but it kind of but there's like it's under the same house type thing, you know?
Hmm.
So
Well,
no.
it's a really good point. And actually, back in October, we made an acquisition. We acquired a business that was small, but is kind of a modern day data driven headhunting kind of firm. And really, what was making them different is they were launching careers, or like accelerating careers, for people that weren't a perfect fit based on the job description or the resume, but they were kind of making the case and connecting the dots and having a lot of success doing it. And so what we've really started to kind of get our heads around is like, how, what we want to become ultimately, like our ambition. Again, it's just day one, right? So
Yeah.
tomorrow, we want to we want to help people get their first job, their next job, and then their dream job. And I think that that's possible if we can effectively manage people through the system of their career, and then provide them the resources they need, and then also become an advocate for them, right? Because, to your point, it's so hard to get in front of somebody who can make a decision and to really evaluate talent. And the best way that we've come up with to do this is using resumes and job descriptions. And resumes are 542 years old. I kid you not, they're 542
Yeah,
years
I
old.
believe you.
There has to be a better way. And so we're trying to kind of break that whole system. And our internally, what we talk about is we want to try to translate human potential into economic impact. Like, how can we create a language that works, that people can understand and appreciate, that goes beyond things like resumes and job descriptions, because these things suck. And any
Hmm.
person, like, I guarantee you, like, I do a lot of speaking at conferences, and I always say, like, who in the room thinks that a resume is a great business tool? Nobody raises their hand. And then I also say, okay, now if I said you have an open position and I know a great person that I think you should talk to that would be like a really good fit, the first thing you're going to ask me for isn't their email address so you can reach out to them. It's going to be what? Their resume, right? We are addicted to this idea of distilling people down into lines on a page. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have to break that addiction before we can, really move on. And so that's what we're trying to do and trying to help people with. But you're absolutely right. Like advocating for talent as it's, that's not early career, that's mid career, or that's like looking to go to the next step. Because it's often the people that are like the jack of all trades that are the best leaders because they can relate to the most, to the largest number of people. They can tap into different sources of information. They can think critically. They're well rounded, right? Which is exactly what you want all leaders to be. But there's this gap that exists between like somebody who's well rounded and has had different experiences. Trying the mid level of the career is so hard for those people because they don't fit a specialty, right? Like the thing I always say is like you almost need the one thing that gets you invited to the meeting, and
Mm-hmm.
then once you're in the meeting, that's when you shine, right? But like for most people, like the hard thing is like what is picking that one thing that's going to get you into the meeting. Like for me, it was
Yeah.
like data science. I was the data nerd that they were going to bring into the meeting, and then all of a sudden they're like, wow, he can talk. He's not just like a troll who sits behind his computer,
Yeah.
right? But like that was the thing, and but we force people into these boxes, right? And that's a tragedy. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, it's kind of funny sometimes because there's so many memes now, and like, you look on social media and it's like how bad the job search is, and I mean, I
mm-hmm.
feel, but it's kind of funny though. Like it's like you don't know if you want to cry or laugh, but it's just funny how hard job search is, and I think the reason that we resort to resumes is because what I'm starting to realize is not a lot of people know how to have a good conversation and how to ask the right questions from just anybody they meet. So I think the ability, so it's like a cheat sheet, like, oh, let me just ask you about your resume. Like, no, no, just tell me. And then being able to ask proper follow-up questions and so on, and then being able to understand the picture that that person's trying to paint, and I think that's probably part of it, or maybe we're just too busy. That could be it as well, you know what I mean? So I don't know what it is, but we definitely just
Well,
need to get rid of it.
yeah, I think I'll say I think part of it is that for so long we have been in kind of we call this the job market, right? But it's not really a market. We have been in this sort of like it's like job procurement or like talent procurement, right? Like that's what we existed. But I think we're going through a change right now, kind of societally, that's moving us towards what I like to call like the age of the consumer candidate, because for the first time you have people that are looking for jobs and they are making choices and clarifying their interest based on things beyond just what a job pays and where it's located and what the name of the company is. Like they're saying like, hey, I don't agree with their social stance on this. I don't like this that came out about them. I don't like this industry or what they do. And so they're making a more informed sort of decision around the job market, and they're kind of voting with their feet. So you're seeing it increasingly. We work with the insurance industry a lot, and the insurance industry has been quick to adopt like our model because they love what we're able to do, because there's still a ton of jobs in insurance, but 8 out of 10 recent college graduates list insurance as one of the industries that they would never work in. So like what
Hmm.
is that industry going to do when they've got an aging workforce and they've got this like lack of a funnel coming in? You know, Google doesn't have this problem because all these people want to work there. But so like the moment a company goes through the stage of realizing that they don't have an abundance of supply, that they just get to go pick and choose and kind of take a cheat sheet to, that's when this becomes really really important, because most companies that are using filtering algorithms and connecting job descriptions to resumes, they think they're doing this because it's the right way to do it, but their level of like discernment or how they're getting to the end result is based off of like the way that massive companies with so many job applications that they don't know what to do with are doing things, right? But like
Mm.
most companies aren't in that zone. So we've studied this and found that like most companies, based on their filtering algorithms and how they're actually like vetting talent, are only making themselves available to 14% of the available talent that could do that job in that place right now. that's like
Mm-hmm.
currently looking, 14%. If
Yeah.
you're going to cut down your odds down to just 14%, like how are you sure that that's the best 14? Like that doesn't mean it's the best 14. It's just the best 14. It's the 14 that whose resume best fits your job description. But like that doesn't mean they're interested in your company. That doesn't mean anything else. It just means that those are the ones you're interested in seeing. So now if you limit that number and say that only 3% of them are actually applying to your company, you're completely ignoring 97% of the potential talent out there. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have a talent, we don't have like a talent shortage. We have a misunderstanding of how to evaluate talent, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
I think you're so spot on, and I wish I would have talked to you yesterday or earlier today because I told you I did an interview and we're talking about the talent scarcity and how there's so many applicants and the applicants are like everybody's looking for not everybody a lot of people looking for a job but then companies like there's no talent and it's you just answered that's why it's our
Yeah.
inability of not utilizing the tools that are just like Avenica. I would have been like Avenica is the solution, so it's no it's
Call
it
them
really
back.
is.
Let's get them on the
I'm gonna
line. Let's
I
yeah, yeah.
will redo the interview.
Yeah.
But no, but it's spot on. I think that's a big part of it, and I think the next hurdle is like making sure the companies invest right in these
Yeah.
tools, and I think that's another realization that a lot of companies starting to come to, and on that point, as we're looking into the future 2-3 years from now, right, like first, I mean, I think what you guys are doing is definitely spot on. I think that's probably going to rebuild. You're already doing it, you're already changing the way we recruit, and I think that's brilliant. What are some of your predictions, future of work? What are you guys doing? What are you thinking about as the leader of the company?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a fair amount of time thinking about sort of the future of work, and I think the one biggest takeaway, or the one biggest thing that I always come back to is that the future of the workforce is going to be made up by people that can do more than one thing well. So like it's counted against you before that you were a jack of all trades,
Yeah,
right? But I
it's
think in
my
the
time now.
future, yeah, it's your time because you're not going to be able to sustain a workforce of people that can only do one functional thing well because the day and age of us, with the introduction of AI, the day and age of us being able to kind of put pen to paper and do just this one thing is starting to evaporate. You think about something like writing, right? And I love writing, and it's something I'm good at. But the ability for you to go and to chat GPT and say like, hey, write me a chapter of a book, like it's insane, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
that can happen, and it's democratizing writing, and so like that's always been sort of a strategic advantage. But like now I can't just be good at writing, I've got to be good at something else. So like we all need to be thinking about like what are the things that we're good at today, and how do we, again, keeping sort of that beginner's mindset, how do we get better at something else tomorrow, or add to our tool set, or add to our skill set. I think we've talked about it probably for the last 20 years, but I think where we are, we're not in the age of AI, we are in the age of continual learning. We have to continue to develop, continue to learn, continue to grow. AI will drive us there because that is going to be the sort of like perpetual thing that's chasing us, right? Like unless we grow and develop, like we are going to just start to see roles and functions eliminated because you can go to AI for that. But the next, what's exciting about this to me is like, yes, it's going to create some redundancies, and it's going to allow us to do some other things, but it'll allow us to also do some higher order thinking and to create new things and to get creative and to build new things, and to take out some of the kind of like mundane tasks that we've done before. I don't think this is that different than the revolution in some ways that we went through by having things like Microsoft PowerPoint. We don't call it a revolution, but like there used to be a profession called desktop publishing, where like there were people in companies who were just creating like PowerPoint decks for executives to go use or salespeople to go use. Like that used to be a whole function, and people were like, pulling these things together like it was like an at-home like a craft fair kind of project, right? Like that was completely blown up by having something like PowerPoint, which like now everybody can do it. Like it used to be that only accountants and mathematicians knew how to navigate spreadsheets and think about like rows and columns of data, but now everybody can go in Excel and do that, right? Like we've gone through some of this before. This is just a bigger, it feels different. And so I think the future is really going to be about how do we draw upon our sort of plethora of experiences, and then like leverage the tools around us that do the one thing well, and then
Mm-hmm.
put that into practice, right? It's not about being scared of it. It's about learning how to leverage it. And so
Yeah.
we're actually encouraging everybody in our company to start playing with ChatGPT, start thinking about how that can enhance your work. How can that make you more, more productive? We actually, I don't know if I should share this, but we just got listed as a finalist for an award that we completely did the whole award application on ChatGPT. We completely did the whole thing. We didn't write a single word of it. We just put,
Hmm.
we put the questions in, had all the answers, and submitted it, and we just got, we're a finalist. So,
Yeah.
I kind of hope we don't win because that would be sad. But yeah,
But it's the reality. I mean it's and also there's not a lot of regulation obviously, so it's like you don't so it's like it's all fair game at this point, you know.
yeah,
I'm excited for it. I use a lot of AI tools for podcasting,
hmm
repurposing of content. It's just the most brilliant thing I've ever come across. Like there's just
yeah,
anyway, it's brilliant. So I'm very excited. I'm doing my own learning to like wrap my head around the larger kind of AI and machine learning and just kind of understanding that whole area. Scott, I could talk to you for hours, but I'm mindful of your time. I'm actually really excited to hear you talk in person as well at the upcoming conference. So I'm
just
looking
lower
forward
your
to that.
expectations. Just lower
No,
your
never.
expectations.
No, no.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be awesome. So before I ask you my last question, I ask all of my guests, tell me a little bit more about where can people find you if they want to get in touch with Avenica or you personally. Where do you hang out at the most virtually?
yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Uh, um, so I'm available. I pretty much accept anybody's invitation to connect on LinkedIn, just because I think it should be more of like an open community where you can connect and talk. And I do my best to read every LinkedIn message that I get. Sometimes it takes me a little while, but I do try to read most of them. So I'm always open to talk to people and provide, inside advice or bad suggestions. Um, but yeah, those are some of the kind of key areas. As you mentioned, I'm speaking at a conference in DC at the end of this month, and then one in Chicago in April, and then another event in New York in April. So I'm kind of out there speaking and doing some of those things. But yeah, other than that, in terms of like finding Avenica, go to avenica.com, or again, we're on LinkedIn and Twitter and stuff. But yeah, we're always looking to talk to people and find interesting ways to help.
Beautiful. And all of that's going to be shared in the show notes as well. So the last question for you that I ask all of my guests that kind of became a tradition on the
Okay.
podcast is, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
um, okay, this is maybe a weird answer, but it's the first thing that came in my head, so that's what I'm gonna go with. Um, uh, is this what you were made for? And so what I mean by that is like it's something I try to ask myself anytime I'm doing something that makes me feel like that I'm too tired or I'm uncomfortable or like this is hard. It's like was I put here? Am I on this planet to like pursue just sort of like easy things and comfort and satisfaction and like just sort of like creature comforts, or am I here to like make an impact and to like do something with the time I have here? Because our lives are so short, right? And it's like I think about this in the morning. I'm an early riser and I'm a morning person, which probably annoys a lot of people. But the first thing I always kind of ask myself is like, is this what I was made for? Like, was I made here to like curl up underneath the blankets and go back to sleep and pretend I don't exist? Like, that's an easy thing to do. Like we all have that urge, and not to say like I don't conquer that every day. Like there are days that I sleep in a little bit. But I think kind of if we could all ask ourselves that question a little bit more, and not not that we need to go seek motivation, because I think we often seek motivation from like outside resources, but I think the motivation that is most powerful is the stuff that we can draw from within, right? And so if we can think like, what am I here for? Like, why am I on this planet? Like, what is my purpose? How am I supposed to be make? What kind of dent can I make? And just challenging yourself. Like anytime you want to do something easy or comfortable, like, is this what I was here for? Is this why I'm
Hmm.
here? Like, am I here to eat like all of this ice cream and then go sleep for 12 hours? Probably not. Like, that's probably
Hmm.
not the best use of my next 12 to 15 hours, right? Like, and thinking about life is and time is something that's scarce. Like, I think, it can be incredibly motivating. It can also be create a sense of panic too, which like you have to kind of moderate that. But like, asking yourself like, what are you here to do? And just challenging yourself to live up to that every single moment of every single day. And I tell people all the time, like it's so much more rewarding to like look back on things that you struggled through and got through and achieved and overcome than it is like nobody remembers the time that they like stayed in their pajamas all day and just like watched TV and ate ice cream. Like nobody remembers those days, right? Like they may feel
Mm-hmm.
good in the moment, but they don't last. You remember the things that are hard. You remember the things that were challenging that demanded the most of you. And like, life's about going through those kinds of challenges and embracing them and taking them head on. And like it's hard, it's uncomfortable, but it's worth it every single time.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, you have shared some knowledge with me. You've definitely inspired me, and I'm sure my
Well, thank
audience
you.
feel the same way. I appreciate you. Appreciate the work that you're doing. I think we need to do a part two at some point because there's so many more things that I would love to talk to you
Would love
about.
to.
So we will make it happen. And until then, thank you.
Thank you.